right. Okay, I do apologize for that. I hope that you're still very much with me. And again, you will be getting the entire recording, so don't worry at all about that. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, all of you are back on the call now. That's fantastic. I am so sorry, guys. You'll get the entire recording of my blabbering about this as well. So we were on the CV screen. So I will just make sure that we go. So I'll just do a quick recap of this screen in case anyone missed towards the end there. So on every CV, you should have these key things. So your career objective, your personal and professional traits, your education, and that sort of stuff. And your contact details. So like I said, the moment you land in the new place, wherever that is, make sure that your contact details are reflecting a local address in the country or ideally in the city where you're looking for work. Because someone in recruitment will pretty quickly look at your CV and say that, you know, they, sorry, just double checking. A few of you joined. Yeah, fantastic. I'm so glad you're back. And they will actually check and look at whereabouts you're located, because they will look at that and go, well, what's the likelihood if we need someone quickly to come in and cover a job that they're going to be able to be available for an interview tomorrow. All right. So the next one was to have a clear order within each section. And this was what I touched on quickly before we got cut off before. So sort things in order of importance of how they support your career objectives, or in this case, the specific role. So obviously you will have chronological order on different jobs that you've had. You will have chronological order on the education you've gone through. But remember this, like I said before, you can have a big master CV with everything you've ever done. And then depending on the role you apply for, you cut bits out, but you save your master CV somewhere safe. And then you simply just put in the employment that's relevant. You know, if you worked at McDonald's or the local pub when you were quite young, that might not be key for the sales job you're applying for now. If you don't have a whole lot of work experience on your CV, it's not an obstacle, but be mindful of what you put on there and how you spin it and how you describe it, because this is all about marketing you and the skills that you have. And the next one is write a tailored cover letter for each job you apply for. So the thing with the CV, as most of you would know, the CV is just the, you know, I would say no more than 2 or 3 pages long that outlines the things on the top end of this slide. The cover letter is about half a page long, half a page to a full A4 page long. And what you do in that is that you actually describe in more detail what's specifically in the application. So let's say you had a job as a community support officer and you'd be working with children and teenagers, etc., etc. And even if you don't have anything specific in your work experience about that, make sure to write a cover letter anyway and say, in addition to my experience when I worked at, you know, this company, we frequently had to work with children and teenagers, etc. So your cover letter is your chance to outline the skills that you have and how they specifically address that. Now you can have a sort of a bit of a master cover letter if you wish, that you can kind of just go in and chop and change in, but make sure that you tailor it for each job. Because I have a friend who used to work in recruitment in the UK, and she said you'd be surprised how many times people send in a cover letter or a CV referring to a completely different job. So they haven't even bothered to look through their application and have a look at that. Just gonna have a quick look because someone seems to have a question. Okay, I have a question about the order on your resume. If you have experience within marketing, would you put that job first, even though you have had another role after that? I would probably say keep it chronological if you can. We can chat a little bit more about your question after the call if you want to. If you want to chat more about marketing, I can probably give you some more tips around that as well. But I will probably say, if you have I would say in your case, keep it chronological, but make sure that you have more detail on the job that's relevant. So let's say that you had, right now you're working in hospitality and you've done that for the last 2 years, but previously you worked in marketing. So I would make your hospitality role the most recent, but I would also try to highlight anything in that role that was even remotely marketing related. You know, when you had to do, you know, sales and customer service and you know, to present or be the face of something. And in the specific marketing role you had, you can really flesh it out and describe in much, much more detail what you did. So it's not necessarily just the order, but also the weight. So in your case, the marketing role would be the higher weighted item, if that makes sense. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'll have a question and answer thing a bit further down as well. All right. So these are a few things that you need to have ready up front, and you can prepare this way before you go. When I moved to the UK, I actually had all this ready like a couple of weeks before I left. And this is something that it doesn't really matter how advanced the job you're going for, you should have this ready anyway, even if you're just backpacking or traveling. So an up-to-date CV, so we talked about that on the last one. So 2 to 3 pages max. Don't make this super long. Every country will have slightly different rules about what a CV can look like. And this is really easy to find on Google. So if you're moving to the UK, just Google things like UK CV examples or UK CV templates, and you will be able to find the structure. Now, the common thing is some countries will be allowing them to go really, really long, and it's page after page after page. If you haven't looked interesting enough in the first 2 pages, most recruiters won't read your whole CV. So focus on making it short and to the point and relevant for that job if you can. And again, if you have a master CV with every single thing you've ever volunteered for, worked with, etc., it's fine if that's longer, but the CV you send in to apply for the job, make sure that that's a bit shorter and more concise. Have written references from previous jobs or volunteer positions that you've had or anything like that. So if you can get someone from a previous place to write you an email or a formal letter on their letterhead of that organization and just, you know, describe you and that sort of stuff. If you're going to a country where English is not the main language and you are fortunate enough to be able to get references in the local language, like if you're going to Spain and you can get a reference written in Spanish, brilliant. If you can't, English is perfectly fine, all right? Scanned copies of the certificates, grades, or anything like that. So sometimes when we're heading out overseas to travel and have fun or to seek employment in another country, we don't have scanned copies of all of our certificates and final grades and diplomas and things. If you can, the default in the world is English. So make sure that, let's say if you did study or live in a country where your final transcript is in another language, see if you can pay a little bit extra to get a translated version to English. Most schools will be able to give you both. So have that scanned with you. You don't need to have the original. In the rare occasion they do need the original, maybe you can get a family member or friend to send you the original. But scanned copies will most often be sufficient for what they want. And it's not very common, at least not here in Australia, nor in the UK, that they will ask for extracts from your grades, unless you're doing something quite specific and academic. That would be the time for them to ask for that. And this one's really, really important. Names and contact details for your professional and or volunteer references, minimum 2. So you need to have at least 2 people, professional people that you've worked with, paid or unpaid, that would be happy to vouch for you and would be happy to provide a reference, maybe not in their mother tongue. So this can be hard because the tricky thing with this is that if you don't have experience of working in an English-speaking country and your references are not comfortable speaking English, if someone was to call and check and say, hey, you know, we wanted to call you and check how Mary was to work with. So make sure you've sussed them out before, maybe even if it was 5 or 6 years or however long since you worked for them. Call them up or email them and say, hey, I'm going to this country. I'm going to be applying for jobs in this sort of area. And you may get a call or an email from someone wanting to check my references in the next couple of weeks. Just wanted to give you a heads up and make sure that you're okay with that. 99% of the time, they're going to go, of course, cool, not a problem. but make sure you have at least two, because I've found both in the UK and Australia, and I'm sure this is similar in other countries as well, they will ask for more than one. So minimum two, ideally three if you can, of people who have worked with you and would be happy to recommend you. All right, we've got a couple more questions. All right, so would it be an idea to write about it more in the cover letter and not really mention the lesser important job? Possibly. I'm assuming you're referring to the previous question about the order on your resume. Look, really what you want to do is make sure that when you apply for any job, make sure that only the things that are really relevant for that job or could be remotely connected to that job are included on your CV. And yes, obviously you want to highlight in more detail in the cover letter of the most important things about it. So it's really up to you. It will depend a little bit on the situation and the job that you are applying for. The one thing I will say, actually, which may be relevant for you people here, when I applied for the job in the UK that I ended up getting with the Scandinavian bank that was establishing, I had my very first job, believe it or not, was at McDonald's. And when I applied for the job in the UK, oh, excuse me, something happening here. Here we go. When I applied for the job in the UK, I actually had McDonald's still listed on there because I hadn't had a whole lot of jobs. I'd been at university for a few years. I didn't have a whole lot of experience to put on there. And actually, my manager, we actually ended up having a long conversation in my interview about the fact that I'd worked at McDonald's as my first job because he did as well. So actually, the least important job on my resume started a conversation that we could both bond over, which was very ironic because obviously it was nothing related whatsoever with that. So I will say that, it's totally up to you how much or how little you want to share. Sometimes if people see gaps in your resume, it's sometimes worse to have left that year or so blank. If you worked with a job that wasn't as important in your industry, someone will possibly ask you at the interview and say, hey, I noticed there's a gap here between 2014 to 2015. What did you do that year? And you might say, oh, I traveled overseas, or I did this, that, and the other. So don't be afraid to mention the job that you did. And it could literally be, yeah, I worked in hospitality for this company between 2014 to 2015, aside of my studies and some of my job duties for this. Cool. And another question, is it better to write the references than write references upon request? I have always put references available upon request on my CV, and only very few jobs will ask for references up front. Obviously, whenever you leave the details to a reference that can be contacted, make sure that that person knows they might be called. Make sure they know what job you've applied for, so they know how to highlight your skills in relation to that job. Very few times, I know that sometimes in government jobs, both in the UK, Sweden, and in Australia, as far as I'm aware, they will sometimes ask for your references up front. Very rarely do you need to do that. So I would say as a default, put references available upon request, and which indicates that you have references and you are aware that they're going to be asking for them. So that should be enough for most employers. Coolio. Great questions, guys. So timing. So the interesting thing about finding work in another place is the timing. So you need to be aware of a few things, because it can be hard to know how you're most welcome. You guys were so grateful. So nice. I love it. So the thing you need to be mindful of here about timing, when you're coming to a new country, and Sweden and Australia, or Europe and Australia, are two great examples of this. So the tax year here doesn't run by the calendar year. So the tax year in Australia finishes on June 30 and starts on July 1. Whereas in most countries, or many countries, it's the calendar year is actually the tax year, which is January to December. So the thing to be mindful here is that very few people will employ you towards the end of the tax year. People are a lot more likely to have budget to employ more people at the start of the next year. So for example, it might be a lot easier to get a job in Australia after July 1, when the new budgets have been approved, depending on what type of company you're going for. Depending on the work you're doing as well, be aware of when the university is in session in school and when they're on holidays. Because when university students are on holidays, it will inevitably be harder to find some type of work. Not necessarily everything. If you're going for a full-time job in a company, it might be easy enough to get a job anyway. But if you're looking for part-time work or a contract or something like that, if you are competing without knowing it with all these university students, you might really struggle. Try and look up general job trends. So maybe just, our good friend Google, right? Listen into Google and try and look for, the obvious general job trends that are going on in your country. Are they cutting are they making a lot of people redundant in the engineering field? If you're an engineer, you might want to be aware of that. Is there a high need for nurses and people in healthcare? It might be really good to be aware of that. Maybe you can leverage that a bit more. Another thing which I always chuckle about, but big holidays. So here in Australia, people tend to take shorter breaks of holidays, but they tend to be around school holidays. So school holidays over Christmas, people are out for a few weeks and pretty much no one will be in the office or ready for work meetings. Most offices are still open. The equivalent of that, I know we have a few Swedes on the call this evening. In Sweden, to try to get anything done between the middle of June to the middle of August is pretty much impossible. And when I told people in the UK that Sweden basically closes down for the month of July, they were like, why? That's so weird. Now you can see why this is actually something that you want to know before you go. Because not only can you plan how much you need in savings, and when it's better to start looking for work, you can also plan when you're going to be arriving. So if you come to Australia in the backpacker season, starting in, say, early November all the way up until February, you are going to struggle to find retail work, so work in a shop or in a bar or in a cafe. Yes, there's a high rotation of people coming and going. If you're looking, and I think a few of you on the call here might be talking more about building your career, more, full-time, long-term work, then it's a little bit different. But I will mention timing anyway, because it is quite important to be mindful of it, just so that you're aware of it. Cool. All right. So we're getting there, guys. Not too many slides left. I will be going a few minutes over. So if anyone does need to leave, we're bang on 9 o'clock here in Melbourne. If you do need to leave, by all means, hop off. I will send you the recording afterwards. If you want to stay on the call, we've just got a couple of more minutes to go, and I've got some real gold to share. So don't miss this, okay? All right. So networking. Networking is something that landed me my sponsored job. Networking is what will make you better connected, more likely to move within companies as well as to other companies. And I will share at actually, I might as well share it now. So I worked for the large media company here for a while and got sponsored to stay in Melbourne. But the interesting thing after a while that I realized is I was working more in sales and project management, which was fun and challenging, and I got to do some really interesting training courses. But the thing I really wanted to try, I wanted to get more into marketing and work out how marketing and sales were different, but yet complementary with each other. So what I did, thanks to contacts that I had in my job at the time, I just kept putting it out there and saying, hey, look, I really enjoy this stuff, but I would really love an opportunity in marketing, and maybe for just I want to work in a biggish organization, but maybe just slightly smaller than where I am now. Would you believe it? With the connections that I had and a handful of conversations, I had a job interview in a marketing role in another company within a matter of weeks. So I worked in the first role for a couple of years, saved some money, worked my way up. And then I wanted to move sideways to marketing for another company. And by that point as well, the benefit of working for a little while in a company is, first of all, they see that you're loyal. So I was in that media company for almost 3 years. So they see that you're loyal to that role, and also you're building up good references in Australia. So if you haven't lived in Australia or in the country you're going to before, you're building up local references and something that a new employer can relate to. Because everyone knows that if it's something that you can't really relate to, the confused mind will just say no. And very often that's what happens for recruiters and employers. But so what happened for me is networking was actually the thing that got me into the marketing job, which made me a marketing account executive for a smaller company. Now, all these titles sound really fancy, but I even had people reporting into me. So it's a half, sort of almost like a half manager role. And that would have never happened if I hadn't put out to my networks and said, hey, I like where I am. I kind of want to take the next step. Something like this is what I'm looking for. Because when people know what you're looking for, they can help you, believe it or not. So a few things I would say, and it depends a little bit again on the country that you're going to, but LinkedIn is one of those things that a lot of people think, oh, it's just about your CV and, it's just something, that you have. It's like an online version of your CV. No, it's not. It's kind of like the professional version of Facebook. And if you haven't yet familiarized yourself with LinkedIn, I would recommend you to go onto my page. I will actually include a link to my LinkedIn profile in the follow-up email if you guys would like that. I'm happy to include that so that you can look at what I've done with my LinkedIn profile. Because the cool thing, I don't have every single job I've ever had on my LinkedIn profile, but I have the relevant ones because it also means that I can connect with people who used to work with me in those roles. Some people can recommend you based on what you've done in the past. So I think, let's just see, a few of you commented here. Hopefully, I can open this up. Let's see. Awesome. Okay, cool. I'll definitely share that with you guys if you think that it's going to be helpful, because LinkedIn is something that not all people are used to using, and there is a nick to using this and expanding your contacts as well. You can also read a lot of really good professional articles. So for example, if you really, I know there was a question about marketing before. If you really want to get into marketing, get on LinkedIn, make sure your profile is nice and updated, join a few groups about marketing in the country you're in. It's kind of like Facebook groups, so it's not that hard to do. Hop in there, read the latest articles and trends in your industry, the problems people are having, and you could even, every now and then, the LinkedIn jobs section. They actually have a job section. I don't know if you know that, on LinkedIn, where you can apply for jobs. So I've actually applied for several jobs on LinkedIn. The only reason I didn't get one of them was my visa conditions at the time. But it is actually not a bad thing at all. And you can start looking at that. So let's say I'm on LinkedIn in the UK. I'm planning to move to, I don't know, Holland. I can start looking at jobs in Holland before I've even moved to get a feel for what it looks like, right? Cool. All right, let's see what we've got here. Cool, excellent. And yes, LinkedIn is really cool. Someone said there, people connecting with you or people liking your profile. So it's a really good way of building your network. And what I will say as well, if you're going to invite and connect with people on LinkedIn, always send them a short message. Hi. It can be the shortest, semi-personalized thing ever. It could literally be like, hi, John, I noticed that you are a marketing coordinator for a blog company. I love the work that you guys do, especially around this project that I saw in the media lately. I'd love to stay connected here and see how we could help and support each other. It could be really nice, short, and professional. What a lot of people do, though, is they hop on LinkedIn and they just add people. It's not a problem, but the only downside of that is you don't actually have any kind of personal connection with that person, and they don't know you from a bar of soap. So they're going to look at it and go, I don't know who this Anna lady or Mary lady is. Yeah. So another thing you can do with so LinkedIn is obviously mainly online networking. Sometimes you'll find networking events via LinkedIn, but an even better one in some countries, especially here in Australia, is meetup groups. So Meetup is it's a bit of an online event registry, if you will, where you can go in and search for different types of events in your city or country. So you could, hypothetically, you could hop in and search for, London young professional networking event. And I bet you'd find something there. Or Sydney young professional French networking event. It could be anything, right? Another thing can be Facebook. Now, on Facebook, you would network very, very differently. So Facebook is more about joining groups that could be able to help you with information. So for example, if there is an expats looking for work group in your city, that could be something worth joining. if there is a group for your nationality, so say, you know, Swedes living in London, that might be a place where I could go and put a question out about a job. Now, the thing about Facebook, though, because I see this all the time in the Facebook groups that I'm active in, people don't do their research. They hop in this group and they say, hey, I want to know if it's hard to get a job in London. Now, you can imagine that people reading this living in London are going to go, well, what kind of job are you after? How old are you? You know, is it a junior position? Is it a senior position? Do you have the right to work here? Or do you need a visa? Do you need to be sponsored by someone? So a better quality question to ask is say, hey, I'm a marketer. I've got experience from these different fields. I don't want to go into too much detail here. Has anyone got experience from working in the marketing area in London? And would be happy to exchange a few private messages with me. I'd really appreciate it. You see how you've gotten specific rather than saying, does anyone know about marketing jobs in London? Sometimes you can be lucky and sometimes you can keep an eye out, and sometimes in groups they will post specific tips or specific job ads even. So that's around Facebook. So I would just say be a bit mindful because yeah, it is a slightly different thing on Facebook, and you just want to make sure that you show people that you've made an effort. Don't be lazy. If you're lazy, people are not going to answer, okay? You don't need to do heaps of research. It's just about how you phrase the question. All right? So, expat forums. So these can be on Facebook or elsewhere. There are many different types of expat forums online, and there are also some that meet face-to-face. So there is a really good one, if you haven't checked it out yet, it's called Internations. So Internations. And I do believe there's a free membership available, and they do some events that are professional, some events that are just social, and they exist in quite a few places around the world. So definitely well worth checking them out. And, you know, otherwise just Google like Expat Forum Australia, Expat Forum India, or wherever you're going. And I'm sure that you'll find that there will be country specific and sometimes even city specific expat forums that you can join. And again, be mindful of how you ask questions. People are expats and travelers are the happiest, friendliest people I know who are so willing to help out. Just make really, really, really sure that you have done a little bit of research and you ask the question as respectfully as you can. Because the more specific you are, the more they can help you. Also look at family and friends connections. So if you're going to a certain country, you know, you might not have any personal friends, but maybe your neighbor's daughter is working in that country. Or maybe your distant cousin so-and-so used to work in England, which accidentally is where you're going to move. So think outside the box here. Think about family and friends. You know, they might not be able to get you a job, but they might give you some other tips around how to structure your CV, what to think about. If they did work for a big company, you know, they might be able to say, actually, don't send your application to HR, send it to this lady and blah, blah, blah. You know, so you can kind of get in through the side door a little bit instead. Your past employers. Now, depending what size of company you worked for, and even if it's way back when, I think there was a question earlier here in the call about someone saying, well, you know, I worked for them ages ago. Go back to your past employers and say, actually, I'm going to move to England and I noticed that you guys have a branch in London. Is there any chance that you could connect me with someone there? Because they might very well be able to. Even if it's not the exact dream job that you had, maybe it's the job that gets you started. Much like in my case, in both England and Sydney, the role that gets you started so you can start networking and building your networks and making a bit of money as well. And sometimes your school or your university will have study exchanges with other countries. So maybe they'll say, you know, maybe you go to one of your professors and they did an exchange semester somewhere, which is actually accidentally where you're moving to. So be open and think outside the box here, because there's so many opportunities that people sometimes don't realize. All right. So on networking, and I've said it before and I'll say it again because it's important, do your research, show interest, and ask insightful questions about them. So this is mainly if you network face-to-face, if you go to an event or a networking event in the new place you're going to. And think about it this way. If they describe, you know, ask questions about their role or what they're doing. And even if, let's say, you want to get a job in marketing, and you meet someone who works in sales, or you meet someone who works in the finance or the legal department for a big company, remember that they still work for a big company that might potentially be somewhere that you want to work. So start asking questions and say, oh, okay, well, what are the trends in your company? Or, how many employees do you have? And, oh, okay, cool. And are you based all across the country, or, etc. So ask sort of more about how you solve their problem, And because the thing is, if you have a specific skill set or something like that, you can certainly add an awful lot of value for them. And lastly, have a short statement ready of what specific type of or opportunity you're looking for. So find a way of introducing and saying, oh, that's really interesting, John. Thank you so much for chatting about that. I've got 5 years of experience in this field, and I've also got a degree where I focused on blah, blah, blah. I'm looking for an opportunity in a sales team or a sales environment to further these skills. So be interested in them first, and then kind of introduce yourself and what you're looking for. Because if you do that, they'll be able to go, oh, well, we don't have any opportunities in our sales team, but I know another sales team on another floor for another company that actually had a job opening that they circulated. So be specific with what you want. The biggest problem I see people do when they move to a new country is saying, I will take any job that's available. Any job at all will do. And I don't think that's actually what you want in this case. All right. Cool. We've just got a couple of questions. Oh, yay. A few of you have met through networking at Young Professionals. That's amazing. Good for you. And this is the thing about networking. Even if the person you meet is not the one who gives you the job, someone else could give you a job or refer you or keep an eye out or go, because my area of expertise is coaching, sales, and marketing. But I still know people in a lot of other industries. In policy, I know people who work in finance, I know people who work in legal. And if I go to a networking event and meet a young person who's saying, I'm really looking to get into the legal field, I might know someone who I can send you to. And even if they can't give you a job there on the spot, you're starting to build your network. You could add them on LinkedIn, you could stay in touch with them, etc. So networking is so powerful. And it's fun as well, because a lot of networking events, especially the face-to-face ones, you can actually meet people that you become really good friends with, which is super fun, because then you at least have someone to hang out with while you're looking for your work. All right, we're going to power through, everyone. So final learnings for the call. Again, you're going to get all of the recordings, both of the recordings. Again, my apologies for the technical glitch this evening. So the final learnings that I would say would have helped me immensely when I started out looking for work in new countries is park your frustration and choose to learn how it's done here rather than focusing on what you thought it was going to be like. It's not going to be like what you thought. And if you've landed in a new place, I bet a few of you on the call are nodding right now saying, yep, it was nothing like I thought it was going to be. But you know what? It's okay. Because if you wanted exactly what you had at home, you should have stayed at home. You decided for some reason to go and seek this new opportunity in a new country. And with that, unfortunately, comes some frustrations. It's hard sometimes to understand how it works and why certain things are done so differently from what they are back home. So park that frustration, scream a little bit and stomp your feet if you need to, and then just kind of go, actually, what a great learning opportunity for me to learn how it works here. Schedule coffees with people, go networking with people, and do your utmost to understand how it works. Because only the people who really care get what they want. Give yourself the best chance to succeed. So I see this all the time, have the clarity, be specific. If you could consider, if you're feeling a bit vague and saying, well, I could do sales or marketing, or I'm happy to work anywhere in finance, that's okay. But be specific enough to nominate the field you want to work in, or how big the organization you want to work for. Do you want a huge company or a 5-people company? So get the clarity on what you want and start telling people about it, because then they can help you. Have some savings, have money with you. Don't come here with nothing. I came to Sydney with very little, which was very, very stressful, and it didn't have to be that way. And make sure you have the right visa. If you're on a work and holiday visa like I was, be really sure that you know that, okay, on my current visa, I have the restriction. I'm only allowed to work for each employer for 6 months. That's the reality. That's just how it is. Be specific. If you're not specific, people are a lot less likely to help you. It's that simple. And I think we've talked about this enough on the call for you guys to understand that, yes, you need to be flexible. Yes, in my case, I knew that I kind of wanted to do marketing and sales, and I went a little bit of a roundabout way of doing so. But, you know, you need to be specific and tell people about it, because unless you share it and tell people what's going on and what you're looking for, they don't even know what to look for. Find the job sites and research the roles and pay before you go. So even before you go somewhere, you can find what the biggest job search site is in that country. I'm not actually sure what it is in the UK at the moment. When I was there, it was monster.co.uk. Here in Australia, it's seek.com.au. It's one of the bigger ones. You know, so just, you know, hop onto Google, find the job site, and start researching roles. You know, sometimes the titles can be a little bit confusing, but if you know that you want to work in sales, just put in sales, you know, title sales, and you'll probably start finding roles like sales assistant, sales administrator, sales coordinator, sales manager, and then you can start looking for the type of role that's likely for you. They won't always put the pay on there. Sometimes they will have a salary indication. I remember the UK was better at that than what they are here in Australia. So don't expect all that to be super clear. But it will give you a feel, at least, for what type of jobs are out there, how they're worded, and that sort of stuff. Make Google your best friend. Google is your best friend. It can also be super frustrating to sit on Google, which is why use equal parts of Googling information and reaching out to people who are already there. So, you know, find ways of connecting with people who are based in the country or city you're going to, you know, and all those networking tips on the previous slide, you're going to get the recording so you can look at that to your heart's content. But make really sure that you reach out to people and ask them high quality questions, because they will want to help you. And lastly, think outside the box. Are there more ways to connect with a career that you really want? You know, in my case, it took me a little while to work out that marketing was my passion. And in the meantime, I kind of knew that I wanted to be in the media communication something space. So I kind of aimed there, and I started to find these different things that were really interesting. And the thing that I will say is that the road that brought me from temporary admin coming to Sydney with $500 in my pocket to a marketing manager and head coach is the constant curiosity and willingness to network, the constant curiosity to be open-minded. I've been offered jobs that I've said no to because they didn't feel right, or the company values didn't match what I wanted to do. They seemed too greedy or too corporate, and I actually wanted to move a different way. So I've made some interesting decisions on my way through working here in Australia. But the interesting thing is, the moment you get that first job under your belt, it gets so much easier. All right. We've had a really long call this evening, and I'm sure that you guys have some questions. So just quickly, we've only got about 2 minutes left. So if there are any short questions now, feel free to type them in the question box. While you're doing that, I wanted to chat to you about a special offer for all of you on the call today. So if you find this a little bit confusing, what I'm going to do exclusively for today's call, I'm going to offer you a 1-hour personal career planning session. So that's a 1-hour session with me where we go through your CV and a few other things. And the other thing is that you're going to get access to my entire online relocation program as well. So that's worth over $300. If you sign up before Sunday, the 22nd of May, you get it for $99. You'll get all this via email, this offer. So that's all good. We're about to go. I don't know that there are any more questions in the chat box at the moment. I have really, really appreciated chatting to you all. If you do have any questions that you didn't get answered, email me at the email address on the screen, emmy@thebridgecoaching.com.au. I've had a blast with you guys. You've been great. Thank you for the interaction. Thanks for all your comments. And I will send you an email with the recording and the special offer so you can contact me directly if that's of interest for you. And have a wonderful evening and take care. It's been really, really fun chatting to you all. Have a great evening.